If J.K. Rowling didn't write the Harry Potter books, who did?
That's a big question. Now, some people might have missed this one. You did. I mean, you wouldn't be here if you'd have written the Harry Potter books, let's be honest. This is an odd one because I think a lot of people miss this story because it wasn't generally reported on. But there was an advert by the New York Times in various sort of, posters on subways and this kind of thing in America. And part of this advert asked people to imagine Harry Potter without its creator. That was the actual quotation, imagining Harry Potter without its creation. And this is because of the New York... I mean, the New York Times, I feel, has sort of become very, very ideologically driven. It's like the American version of The Guardian, but even more severe. It's just kind of decided that it hates J.K. Rowling. You can see the image here, there, actually. And it's just, well, firstly, it's this idea. Do you remember this feeds into a few weeks back where there was that group of filmmakers who said they were going to make their own version of Harry Potter, but only with sort of gender-neutral characters.
Yeah, according to their ideology.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, look, this is disgusting because, I mean, how it can be a newspaper that's trying to do this to sell itself, but when you see any company, and they seem to sort of go for J.K. Rowling. By the way, I noticed they're not saying, like, let's get rid of a male creator. They're going for J.K. Rowling. And on top of that, like Body Shop last year, about 2 hours after J.K. Rowling did this famous letter that she put out on Twitter, talking about going through domestic violence. It was a really heartfelt, emotional letter, and asking for understanding and women's rights. And then the Body Shop, 2 hours later, put up this really snarky message, sort of saying, hey, check out this, J.K. Rowling, and why don't you read this book on trans rights? And you're just like... What? And that's a company that mostly sells to women. Like, that's just mental.
You see, I wouldn't mind in a way. I read the statement that J.K. Rowling put out on her blog. It's a big, long blog post. So compassionate, so clearly not transphobic. She reiterates the idea that trans rights are human rights. She says, of course they are. And, she's talking about her concerns about single-sex spaces and about gender self-identification. It's a big, important debate. But what she's not doing is saying, I hate trans people. It's so... What I think is that this kind of reaction by the New York Times is so divorced from reality.
Yeah.
And yet it seems to be quite unaccepted.
Well, there's that thing of, it is shutting down debates. So, whether you agree or disagree with J.K. Rowling, surely the right to ask those questions and to have them up for debate. The idea that the New York Times is saying to somebody, imagine Harry Potter if it created by somebody else. Write another book.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
There's one that exists with Harry Potter. If you don't like it, don't read it. They had, imagine another wizard and make up your own.
Well, did you see the commemorative show that HBO did recently? And they just had a few clips of her, but they basically erased her out of the thing, and then the new Fantastic Beasts film. Because the last Fantastic Beasts film the advert started with J.K. Rowling welcomes you too. And then they just silently took that out. It's like, no, it's not J.K. Rowling anymore. I mean, it's all her characters. She wrote it, she produced it, but basically she's got nothing to do with it.
So,
it's
if
insane.
you kind of take that back then, if people have such a problem with J.K. Rowling and her ideology and her thought process and her creative, then why do they still want to have Harry Potter and all the genius around that if she's such a toxic, negative, awful person? Surely...
Do you think they don't really believe it then?
I think maybe they don't.
Right, maybe not. I mean, who knows? I do think it's a kind of hysteria, and I think it is getting out of control.
It's a bandwagon as well, I think, because it's that, again, whatever the beginnings of this were, have been piled on, and then, people are repeating something. People are just like parrots that just then say, oh, and she said this. Where did she say that? Oh, well, because someone told me. It's like... Please, can you double check? Please, can you look at the actual source of your information? And 9 times out of 10, people are not actually quoting from source of information. They're quoting from their emotional response or a conversation they've had with their mates.
I think that's a really good point, because I've often had these arguments on Twitter, which you shouldn't do, but they don't argue with people on Twitter.
Honestly.
I mean, it's ridiculous. But I have said to them again and again, can you just quote? Quote J.K. Rowling being transphobic, saying something just one would do, and they never can. And they either just take other people's out of context quotations, or they say, oh, well, this person said, or this article says this, and it's we have to be adults, right? If you're going to make an accusation as serious as transphobia or racism or homophobia, you better have some evidence, right?
And that's the thing. Sometimes I act dumb, which isn't difficult. And I will say to people, so what did she say? And they go, oh, well, she said this. Well, where did she say that? I haven't seen that. Where is that? Can you show?
Very frustrating.
Like you say.